Welcome to PetroNoia, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the energy debate. Hosted by Dan Romito, this show takes complex energy issues, strips away the agendas, and delivers clear fact-based insights. Whether you're an industry expert or simply looking for a balanced perspective, PetroNoia brings clarity to the conversation. Each episode, Dan breaks down key topics, from U.S. energy independence to global policy impacts, focusing on the facts rather than the rhetoric, helping listeners make sense of the energy landscape. This is PetroNoia, where we separate fact from fiction to fuel-informed discussions.
Welcome to PetroNoia. I'm your host, Dan Romito. I'm thrilled to have this guest here today. If you recall, we had Mike Howard on the show not too long ago. Mike was able to pull some strings and get Mr. Scott Tinker in the studio today. So Scott, thank you so much for being here. I do want to start off, obviously you've done a variety of writings. You've had fascinating TED Talks. I'm very curious on to start off with the journey. Like, how did you get, you've had this amazing career, but clearly you probably didn't anticipate landing in the advocacy role, for lack of a better word, that you have today when you first started out. I'm just fascinated to figure out or learn, how did you get here?
Yeah. It can be a very short, boring story.
Yeah, let's just give me the Cliff Notes version.
I was born in Centralia, Illinois.
Were you really?
Yeah.
I was born in Illinois.
In the Illinois Basin, and then we moved to the Anadarko Basin, and PJ, and then the Gulf Basin, and back to the...
Your dad was clearly in the business?
He was. I was Shell for 39 years, back when you could do a whole career at a company.
Right.
And I went off to college to be anything but a geologist.
Okay.
But I took a class the first year and loved it.
Okay.
So I ended up with geology and business and undergrad, and worked a year and went back and did a master's in geoscience and worked some more years and did a PhD when I was working full time.
Just a PhD, just one of those?
Yeah. My advisor said, you can do a PhD and work full time, but you can't have a family, those three things. So we had two kids while I was doing my PhD.
Wow. Okay.
Our first two boys. So I proved you wrong. And,
yeah.
And so that was, I think I was 30 to 35 years old in there.
Okay.
And always outcrop based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So doing pretty big wall canyon work and that kind of thing. Looking at rocks, analogs to the subsurface in the oil and gas business.
Okay.
I ended up 17 years in oil and gas, but mostly E&P to start.
Okay.
Then mostly research, building the earliest computer models of reservoirs.
Okay.
When there wasn't a GUI.
Right. When there was no ChatGPT.
No, there was chat was us talking. There weren't even cell phones, man. This is a long time ago.
I do remember my old dad. It's funny. My dad spent 35 years at the same company.
Yeah.
And I remember when the company gave him the company cell phone, and it was like the big block Motorola with the long antenna.
It was a brick.
Yeah.
The first laptops were like body tops that collapsed under their weight. Anyway, stayed until, so that's 17 years, 99.
Okay.
Spray paint was on the bathroom wall. Industry was hurting. Mm-hmm. The labs were all closing. I was with Marathon's lab in Denver.
Okay.
3 boys were born there.
Okay.
We moved to Texas.
Okay.
January of 2000, and was director of the Bureau of Economic Geology at UT Austin.
Okay.
They didn't have any qualified candidates. So they grabbed me.
Right.
And did that for the last 25 years.
Okay.
Fired myself last year from that, but it's a beautiful, big organization.
Mm-hmm.
The State Geological Survey, UT. I was a professor
at
UT Austin, and just always bringing energy and the economy and the environment together, even there at the Bureau.
Okay.
And that's the setup globally. We're looking all over the world at how these things play together. And I call that the radical middle.
The radical middle.
The overlap space of those energy, the environment, and the economy.
The interesting thing about your work that I really appreciate, that I actually think and I'm generalizing the advocacy, right? The broad umbrella here. You do a great job of bringing in the global perspective, right? In your TED Talk, for example, you talk about Kenya, Ethiopia, a lot of the developing countries, and we don't really necessarily talk about that to the extent that we should, at least in my opinion. Was there a particular moment where you decided we have to incorporate that? Did something happen, or there was an event, or when did you decide to bring that perspective into your argument?
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to mention we had our little girl in Texas. I don't want to leave her out.
Yes, don't do that. You'll get the phone.
She's 24 with IBM in Norway right now, but
and she can subscribe to our podcast.
Yeah. we traveled as a family, but U.S. We would always drive in the summers back to Michigan.
Okay.
And so I kind of got that travel in me, that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Went a few places when I was in college, but after college, went to the Soviet Union.
Okay.
USSR wasn't still the wall.
Yeah.
This was 1982.
Wow. Okay, so the height of the Cold War.
Height of the Cold War. We're still several years away from Gorbachev and Reagan tear down that wall.
And what was the impetus for going to the Soviet Union?
I took a French class. There's a connection.
Okay, where are we going with this?
And the professor was actually a Russian lit professor.
Okay.
And we put together a trip of about 20 people, 3-week trip to go there after I had graduated.
Okay.
And it had a big impact on me. I could go into lots of stories from what the Soviet Union looked like. 5 cities, then Leningrad. It's not called Leningrad anymore. St. Petersburg, Moscow, Tallinn, Vilnius, and Kyiv.
Okay.
So each of those cities offered something different.
Mm-hmm.
But I was 22. I was invincible, so I would go out at night when I wasn't supposed to. The bus ran over a soldier. There was all sorts of drama.
Wait, what? The bus ran over a soldier?
Tour bus.
The tour bus? Okay.
Which we were on.
Okay.
That driver got pulled off. I mean, I met young people.
Yeah.
Women would approach us, will you marry me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, look in the mirror. I must be getting better looking or something. But
Do
no.
all those push-ups in the hotel room?
Yeah, it was to get out.
Okay.
And can we get out? We won't ever bother you again.
Yeah.
Meeting young men on trains as we were going between some of these cities. Turns out the tour bus driver was KGB. And
Interesting.
I learned that when my glasses got stolen, and he came off the bus and grabbed the 2 young men who had taken them. So it was a fascinating experience and culture.
Okay.
And that kicked off my global travel bug. I've been in 60 countries.
Yeah.
Not in an airport. I mean, into them.
Right.
And of course, geology doesn't know political boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in countries, traveled. First trip to the Middle East was 97. My work in industry. Could go into lots of stories about all these things. To Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And not just to Dhahran where most of us would go, but deeper into the middle of the city, Riyadh, back when Riyadh was not what it is today.
Right.
Mohammed bin Salman was
a little bit more intense.
Probably a gleam in his in his king's eyes.
Right.
Now he's crown prince, but lots of different experiences that way, and that it's impossible for me not to bring in a global perspective. It's just baked in there, and travel like that. Dan, I so wish it's a luxury.
Yeah,
it's a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever take that lightly or for granted. It also increases your tolerance for difference.
Right.
In humans, you see different geopolitical setups, different religions, different educational levels and backgrounds, and you begin to understand how and why people think the way they do,
right,
and act the way they do. I don't ever pretend to understand it because I get to get on a plane and fly back to this great country,
right,
where we are free to do and say as we wish still. And that isn't that way in most of the world.
Yeah.
So it literally is baked in, and that's how and why I bring that perspective.
Yeah, and then with the global perspective, it's interesting too. Like my personal, I call it the inflection point, right? I visited Guatemala. One of my buddies married a Guatemalan, and she wanted to have the wedding in Guatemala City, and then part of the, I guess, groomsman's gift was like we got to go all around, and then seeing that degree of poverty. Like I think I was like 25. Like they got married young. I'm wearing like cargo shorts and like a backwards hat, and you just look like an idiot, frankly. But then, it dawned on me like, wow, like it is just a different set of circumstances, to say the least. And then you come to find that that's actually more of the norm globally, and then we're the exception.
1.3 billion people in the world today live sort of like we do. Let's call that the developed world.
Right.
And the average of that world, both in terms of energy consumption and per capita income, is lower than the U.S.
Right.
The average of the rich world. And that leaves 7 billion people.
Yeah.
In various stages. It's not, I tend to break it out, emerging, developing, developed, but it's not that. It's a continuum for sure. And even within countries, there's a vast continuum of economic wherewithal.
Right.
India has severe poverty and severe wealth. I've seen the most severe wealth in the world. Been there.
Yeah.
Seen the most severe poverty in the world. In our second film, Switch On, we went to find it, and it wasn't hard. So yes, you're exactly right. The world doesn't live like we live. And in accordance, we can't put our value system onto the whole world because it simply doesn't work. There's a different set of challenges there in most of the world, and some of them relate to very fundamental basic needs. Maslow, remember that? The hierarchy.
The hierarchy, yeah.
Well, look, there's, at the top is self, discovery, if you will, or actualization. No, but at the bottom, it's physiographic needs and security and safety needs. Those are the bottom two tiers. A lot of the world doesn't have those things.
Yeah, like I said, well, I made my boys I watched the TED Talk, and then it was so good, I made my boys watch it.
Were they in trouble? Like a punishment?
Well,
okay, you're going to watch this talk.
No, where we live in Florida is frankly gorgeous.
Yeah.
But it is not at all reflective of reality, right? The nickname for our town is Kid Vegas. There's water parks, golf carts, all this other stuff. And so while we love living there, me and my wife talk about all the time, are we doing the kids a disservice? Because all they know really is what this little bubble of Ponte Vedra, Florida entails, which is not even close to reality. For me personally, I went to college on the south side of Chicago. So you have the north side of Chicago, which is Wrigleyville.
Oh, I know Chicago.
And all this fun.
Yeah.
And then you have Hyde Park, Woodlawn, Inglewood, where the University of Chicago is. And what really hit me is on orientation, it's not like here's the dorm and here's where you go to eat and here's the library. It's don't go to Washington Park at 7, you'll get shot. Don't go here, you'll get robbed. Don't go on the Green Line. Like all these, don't do that, because the surrounding area is one of the worst areas, frankly, in the nation. And then you see that and you're like, okay. One of the things that resonated in your stories was you do this very good, eloquent argument for getting alignment between the industry and the environmentalist. And I'm paraphrasing. But what I think is ironic and equally as frustrating is that the vast majority, and once again, another generalization, but the vast majority of people who push against the oil and gas industry and the fossil fuel industry, they're wealthier. And you could put them in the bucket, relatively speaking, on the global stage, like as elite. Yeah. Like, why does that group of people, do you think, push back against the fossil fuel industry the way that they do?
Yeah, this is a big topic. And before that, if your boys are really in trouble, have them watch our film Switch On.
Right.
That's like an hour and 20 minutes of pain. But we take you into, our first film was about the energy transition, The Switch, released in 2012. The first film looking at what it would take to transition. Yeah. Way out in front. And then we had the first film on energy poverty, released in January 2020. Filming in 1819. And we take you to different countries there. And I think that would be more powerful to them to see kids their age, et cetera. So why do people feel that it's a complex set of things? And I consider myself an environmentalist. I invest in land conservancy. I've camped all over the world, lived in the environment, and try to leave it better than I find it. But I'm thinking there and was educated around the land, the air, and the water. Those are three critical components, pillars of the environment, if you will, which we learned about. I didn't learn about the atmosphere in high school and college. It's up there. Yeah, we learned about the ozone.
When I started doing energy, they're like, like CH4. I'm like,
yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
Methane. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally knew that.
Yeah, pretty potent greenhouse gas. So add that, a fourth pillar. The land, the air, the water. And when I say the air, I mean the local air, the stuff the people we're describing breathe every day. We
Right.
can talk about the harm that does to lungs by breathing particulate matter indoors or even outdoors.
Mhm.
But there's those 4 pillars. You have to keep those in balance. If we push too far in the direction of any one of those, the others suffer.
Yeah.
So I could say we're going to have no emissions into our atmosphere of greenhouse gases. To accomplish that in a variety of possible ways would have harm to the land,
Right.
through mining and deployment of lots of big infrastructure. Could harm the water,
Mhm.
depending on what sources of energy you use. So that it's that critical balance, if you will, of those 4 things against and with, it's an and, it's conjunctive,
Mhm.
and human flourishing.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a little bit about humans and that disparity that exists between the world. It's 10x or more in income and energy. If that is allowed to continue with the wealthy growing and everybody else trapped and pinned, it doesn't end well.
Right.
No economic disparity that grows to a point of extreme ever ends well.
Mhm.
We have to unpin
Yeah.
everybody in the world and move along together. So there's this human flourishing and there's this environmental component. Energy underpins, let me make this clear, energy underpins economic well-being.
Right.
All healthy economies in the world have access to affordable, reliable energy.
Mhm.
Full stop. Energy, the economy, what does the healthy economy allow you to do? Invest in the environment.
Right.
It's very difficult to have clean environments without economic health.
Right.
You just can't afford to do those things.
Mhm.
Okay, the cleanest air in the world, where it's rich.
Right.
Cleanest water, it's rich. We consume the most energy, but we have regulations and we clean it up.
Mhm.
So there's energy, the economy, and the environment. And I think a lot of people don't make that leap between a healthy environment, protecting the environment, and the energy required to do that. So fossil fuels, or your question,
Yeah.
we kind of loop back around. Fossil fuels, when burned, produce emissions. They're carbon. Coal is carbon. Hydrocarbon. Oil is complex carbon and hydrogen chains, and natural gas, mostly methane, CH4, propane, butane, pentane, mostly hydrogen.
Yeah.
So all hydrocarbons, all fossil fuels aren't created equal. Carbon, hydrocarbons, hydrogen. The more natural gas in the mix, the better. It's less carbon for the climate. So when they think about protecting the environment, they think exclusively about the climate today, not the other pillars.
Mhm.
And the thing that produces those emissions are burning coal and oil and natural gas. So there's the detachment. That's a true statement. It's completely factual.
Right. Yeah. In your talk, I love that
Yeah.
point. Not to cut you off. You said this. You had I believe it was a Senate testimony where you made the distinction between completely factual and factually complete. Right.
Yeah, that was Joe Manchin's hearing
Mhm.
4 years ago. We've become friends since.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's a difference.
Right.
I can be completely factual, but I'm picking some facts, but not factually complete. Factually complete is brutal.
Right.
Now, it's a complex world we live in, and
Right.
energy is a complex system.
Right.
I mean, all energy.
Mhm.
So it's not easy to be factually complete. In fact, no individual probably can do it.
Right.
We should strive for that.
Right.
So factual completeness would say, yes, for example, solar and wind are growing faster than any other source of energy in the world today, primary fuel, let's call them, primary energy. True statement. They are. They're growing exponentially and now going linearly, really fast. It's a rate. When you scale them to be part of the whole energy mix, they're still only 6% of total global energy after 25 years of doing that. That's more factually complete. Coal is higher than it's ever been. Oil is higher than it's ever been. Natural gas is way higher than it's ever been.
Right.
Also, so if you were to eliminate fossil fuels, which still represent between 80 and 82% of the global mix, depending on the databases you look at. Let me say that again.
Yeah.
4/5 of our primary energy are coal, oil, and gas in the whole world. We pull them out. What happens to global economies?
Right.
They collapse.
Right.
Not only do you hurt the people we're trying to save from the changing climate, you hurt the whole economy. And the environment tanks. So this is the great detachment that happens in logic, or a logic flaw, when we passionately protect the environment without really understanding all the components required to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no judgment here to me in this. This is not a, oh, you're doing these terrible things to protect the environment and you're harming everybody else. It is kind of you use the word elite, a little judgmental.
Right.
I think it's that we don't know. We've grown up in a world where we understand these things, and yeah, I think everybody would probably love to have the whole world like that, but we don't understand what it's going to take to do that.
Right.
And this is the great detachment.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll give you an example of that. I was working on a project, and this was in Wisconsin, right outside Milwaukee. And we were having a conversation with someone in the economic development office. And we were talking about how do you optimize the energy mix predominantly out in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's going through this, let's call it rejuvenative exercise where they're going from traditional, like old school manufacturing to digital age generative AI. The city is all in on creating data centers and being a technology hub, etc.
So they won't need people anymore soon there in Milwaukee.
That's the thought.
The population will drop.
But one of the detachments, we were making what I think was a very rational, very reasonable argument. They want to incorporate more geothermal and solar into the mix. And that's fine, but to power a data center, you are going to need exponential amounts of natural gas. And then the guy from the economic development office was telling me about this project. First of all, he disagreed with me. But then he was talking about this project where they're putting solar panels on low-income housing and how great it's going to be. And then when you start asking questions, well, who's on the hook for the solar panels in 5 years when the rain, sleet, ice, snow, hail really starts to kick in?
Right.
It's the homeowner in a low-income housing community. When how much they're going to save, couple cents here and there.
Yeah.
And so our argument was, wouldn't it be better to upgrade the infrastructure to provide natural gas, right? Greater access to natural gas within the energy mix. And you might as well, I might as well just said something really evil about it, like his wife or his kids. He couldn't connect those two.
Yeah. So let's pull back from natural gas for a second.
Okay.
I think what you're saying correctly is optionality matters.
Mm-hmm.
Optionality matters in investment portfolios. It matters in real estate portfolios. It matters in energy. The more options, the more stable that portfolio of energy.
Right.
Solar panels in Milwaukee isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Okay.
It's options. It gives some options. Exclusively solar panels would be a bad thing.
Right.
Because it eliminates a bunch of options, and bummer of bummers, night happens.
Right.
Every day.
Or winter.
Yeah, or
Winter
cloudy
Milwaukee.
times. And it's not just clouds in the winter. It's the sun gets lower on the horizon, so the angle of incidence of the sun on a solar panel, it's less efficient. The capacity factors go down.
Right.
So these are real physics things that happen, not judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Physics. You're saying natural gas, I wouldn't disagree, but it could be coal.
Right.
It could be hydro. It could be nuclear. Even some geothermal, depending on how much, depending on the kind of geothermal they have. Is there enough thermal gradient to be able to produce power reliably and affordably? But these are what are called baseload or dispatchable sources of electricity, right? The things I just went through. And what you're describing is in that energy mix, I need some dispatchable, always-on baseload sources of energy, and I could have some that aren't always on. Let's call them intermittent. Right. Sun sets, the wind stops blowing. They can be good friends. I don't mind using solar panels on a roof to add some supplemental electricity to a mix and save burning molecules, or uranium and thorium, or the water in the dam. We know during droughts,
Right,
it's not renewable. Water goes down in a dam. There's no electricity to generate. Nothing is perfect that way. So I think rather than picking a winner And again, natural gas is an extremely versatile molecule.
Mm-hmm.
It's tremendous for power generation and cooking. I don't cook with coal in my kitchen for a reason, particulate.
Mrs. Snicker doesn't like that. It's a little.
Well, I don't cook much at all, but I wouldn't use my charcoal grill in the kitchen. It takes a long time to start it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use oil in the kitchen. I wouldn't. Natural gas comes on, it's hot, it goes off, boom. Even electricity takes a while to ramp up. Natural gas is great for both generating electricity, but also for following a intermittent load. So when people hear about a load following power plant or a battery, two ways to do that really that are effective. The wind quits blowing for a few minutes. It quits blowing for a few hours. It quits blowing for a few days. The Germans have a word for that, Dunkelflaute, which means no wind for weeks.
Yeah.
We have to have something there. Batteries right now, the best ones in the world, 4 hours on the grid, 6 hours, weeks. So natural gas is great for turning on and off to balance out that intermittent load. They're good partners. If I go too far, which it sounds like your friend in Milwaukee was doing when he almost passed out when he said natural gas.
Yeah, he wasn't thrilled.
Yeah. Is again missing a fundamental understanding of how energy systems work.
Right.
It's not a competition. This false competition between certain source of energy and others is silly. It's being fabricated by some who want that competition to happen. It's not doing anybody any favors, particularly the people who can least afford it. And I want to bring that in to this dialogue. In California,
I was just about that. You read my mind, but go on.
Okay. The most expensive electricity in the country dances around with a couple other states, up over 30 cents a kilowatt hour.
Right.
We pay a third of that here in Texas. But it's growing. Our price is going up as we get more and more things that are expensive. Fuel in California, gasoline, the most expensive in the nation. Now, it's not all because California has stopped producing its own oil and gas and refining it. It's partly that. They also tax it to pay for other things. When you have a fundamental product, energy, that underpins everything in the economy, and the price of the basic price of the electrons and the molecules go up, and that's the same cost to each of us. The gasoline I put in the pump, same cost as somebody making $30,000 a year as 300 as 3 million.
Yeah.
The electricity price, the same. It's a hugely disproportionate disadvantage. The people making less proportionally pay way more for their energy than you and I do.
Right.
That's called regressive. That's economically regressive. That's what that term means. So these policies, which may be well-intended, solar panels on a roof for 5 years in Milwaukee, but you get to replace it. I can't afford to replace that. How much does a 3 to 8 kilowatt solar panel system on a roof cost? A lot, especially if it's not heavily subsidized. They can't do that.
Right.
It's just going to go dormant. It's going to be a burden. And then what do they have to fall back on? And this is where, again, it's not the intentions, but we have to intentionally get more educated about energy systems. We have to raise the energy IQ in this country and around the world tremendously, or we're going to continue to make decisions like this, well-intentioned, but unintended consequences, and it's hard to back out of them.
Yeah, I mean, California is the quintessential example. The policies of we're going net zero, we are decarbonizing, we want zero emissions, has been so prioritized over anything in terms of economic policy. Like we spoke to a group yesterday where, I sort of felt after talking to them that, they're telling me that there's no Santa Claus, for example. Like, do you think it's getting better, or
There isn't Santa Claus?
I hope there is. That'd be awesome.
I still believe.
As it relates to California, do you think it's getting better? Like, do you see progress, or do you still think there's a ways to go? Like, where are we at in your opinion?
It's funny. I was there twice in the last 2 weeks, lecturing at a big energy conference at USC.
Okay.
And then at Stanford at the Hoover Institute.
Okay.
Doing markets first mandates.
Right.
You're from Florida. Let's do this real quick. Let's compare Florida and California's electricity mix.
Okay.
I'm going to try to describe it. It'd be easier to look at pictures, but let me describe it. For the last 20 years, Florida made largely a market's choice for its electricity fuel mix. Now, electricity, I really want to make this point clear. Electricity only represents about 25 to 30% of our total energy consumption in the world and here. So a third at the most, electricity, but we talk a lot about it. The other 2/3, industrial, residential, commercial, transportation. We use a bunch of energy. Let's just stick to electricity. So for the electricity mix, Florida, through mostly market decisions over the last 20 years, has pushed into natural gas. About 80% of the electricity generated in Florida comes from burning natural gas in natural gas power plants. Now, you burn natural gas, boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, run a generator, send out the electrons. That's Florida. California, same time, and also the same electricity consumption scale. 2 big states in the country, both consuming about the same amount of electricity. California made a different set of policy choices under several governors, but mostly under Gavin Newsom, their current governor. They pushed into solar and wind. They reduced their nuclear. They reduced their natural gas tremendously and other things. So they have in some senses, a more diverse mix of fuels in their mix. That's good. Mm-hmm. They've also eliminated, though, remember we already talked about the baseload stuff, the natural gas and the nuclear and the coal, which you have to keep a grid stable and reliable. Let's just examine the trade-offs there, because the energy world is about trade-offs. Full stop. Yeah, trade-offs. How did the CO2 reduction go in California over that time? Because that was the intention of going into non-CO2 producing at the source, solar, wind, batteries. CO2 came down in California over that 2-decade time period, a little bit, not as much as they would hope, but Florida's came down a little bit. Didn't come down as much as California, but it came down a little bit. So maybe California did a little better in their power fuel mix than Florida. How about the price? Yeah, let's look at another trade-off we were just talking about, the cost of energy. Florida's cost of electricity went from about 10 cents a kilowatt hour to about 14 cents over that time period. Call it 40%. California's went from about 12 cents to 30-something cents. It tripled, right? It's 2.5 times more expensive than Florida. 2.5 times in a couple decades. That's the fuel mix. And California is importing quite a bit of its electricity now. Not a huge number, but an increasing amount of electricity. It imports from other states, like Germany did from Russia, bringing in natural gas. I'd like to think we're stable here in this country and that California's neighboring states won't cut it off someday, but you never know.
Right. And if they get into a pinch, like they might not have any choice.
When you have big storms or droughts, you use it for yourself. That's right. And so California has created a very unstable, not secure, not reliable, expensive energy system. And it doesn't have to. It's not resource limited.
Right.
Some states, some countries, Japan, bless their hearts, doesn't. It's an island. They don't have many energy choices. California has plenty of choices. Wonderful solar and wind. Mm-hmm. Use it.
Yeah.
Use it. That's great. And it's more southern. The winters aren't as cloudy. It's a great place for the sun. It's a terrific resource in California. Use it. But don't think Mr. Newsom, because he's running for president now, so he's all the...
Oh, you think he's in?
Oh, he's already running. He's becoming more moderate.
That's right.
He has his own podcast.
He's got a podcast too.
So now he's becoming a moderate all of a sudden. So whatever.
Yeah.
Fascinating guy.
Have you spoken to him?
No.
Okay.
And so many people have said, you got to come talk to our legislature. And every time I say, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
We'll see if it ever happens. I'm happy to talk with him, by the way. I think he's probably a smart guy. Don't know him. All I know is what I read and what I hear from the citizens of California.
Yeah.
And I can see what's happening. But most people, when they see the impact of their own policies, they don't say, you know what? Tried it, good intention, not working, let's change.
Right.
And we need to allow policymakers to evolve good intentions, bad outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happened in California and is continuing to happen. And ironically, Dan, there are a lot of people, including professors out in California, that are celebrating this or just pushing into it even more. They use things like California's per capita energy consumption, per capita. It's really expensive. The cost of energy drives consumption down. But guess what else happens when it's that expensive? Companies leave.
Yeah.
People leave. Austin has, a couple former California citizens, Elon Musk,
Yeah.
Joe Rogan.
Right.
I'd love to be on Joe's podcast, talk about these things. Why did they leave? Why did Chevron leave?
Yeah.
Why are others closing the refineries?
Mm-hmm.
Because California is so unfriendly to energy, broad energy, that they can't afford to operate there anymore. This is happening in the UK. The effective tax rate for oil production in the UK North Sea is now 80%.
That's insane.
Apache is closing down its operations in the North Sea, two of the classic first platforms that had another 15 years left in them.
Yeah.
40s and I can't remember the name of the second platform. They're closing them down early. They're going to leave 50 million barrels of oil in the ground that would have paid taxes to the UK
Sure.
and been energy for the region.
Right.
It's going to be left in the ground, never to come out again.
Mm-hmm.
Because so you start as you start to think through these things. Ed Miliband is the Secretary of Energy in the UK. We need to visit with Ed.
Yeah.
Dear Ed, let's chat. Because I don't think you're really intention's good. I don't think you really fully understand what's happening.
But what drives that, right? One of the things, that you were talking about in your papers was this public trust in science and energy communication, bridging that gap, establishing that. There are people like Stanford, or NYU, like very educated, very intelligent people that just can't wrap their head around that. And I don't know if I made this my mission in life, but trying to figure out, back to our conversation on behavioral finance, what drives that? Why is there such a extended group of people that have such a mistrust in what that narrative entails?
The human population is sort of a bell curve.
Yeah.
1 sigma is 66% of us.
Uh-huh.
Here we are, 33% on this side of the mean, median, and mode.
Yeah.
And 33% the other. There we are, chugging along. Then you go to 2 sigma and 3 sigma, and you get out here into the tails of both. If you fit us neatly into a bell curve, we don't fit neatly, but let's pretend. Yeah. There we sit. A lot of the most extreme voices, by the way, on the right red side and on the blue left side, the most extreme voices don't want to talk about that radical middle set of solutions, the compromises, the trade-offs.
Right.
They simply don't want to. Yeah. They're really smart quite often, and they made a conscious decision to be activists for a certain thing. Yeah. Okay? A certain set of principles, a certain set of beliefs. On one side, usually political beliefs. On the other, sometimes it's religious beliefs. Yeah, whatever the drivers are, they've made a conscious decision to push into limited choices.
Right.
Okay.
Almost like the prioritization of like this tribalistic mentality as opposed to just let's figure out a way to solve whatever problem.
Let's work together.
Yeah.
I'm not always going to get my way.
Right.
Hey, guess what?
Yeah. Welcome to
a lot of bad lesson to learn.
Right.
Don't always get my way. Maybe I'm not right all the time. Could that be? I have a talk I give called Seeking Energy Truth.
Okay.
And I start with the thought that I don't know the truth.
Okay.
I've studied it a long time, but there's so many things I don't understand and don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I start with a quote from Aristotle, the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Right.
Let's entertain some thoughts. Don't have to accept them. But that's critical thinking. That's civil dialogue. These are the kinds of discussions we have to have around this really important, complex system called energy and what it underpins. If you oversimplify that, it becomes a project of passion to you or an emotive, we're all emotive creatures.
Yeah.
All have biases and egos, but if that's going to be your driver, you ask why. Fundamentally, I think that's what drives those things. And by the way, you get very popular in a certain set of people,
Right.
with a certain set of people. It might be your academic colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
It might be your NGO colleagues. It might be your church colleagues. It might be your political colleagues. You pick your favorite group. You get very popular because you're saying the things they want to hear, and you have the courage to say them. Speak truth to power.
Right.
Well, it's completely factual truth, but it's not factually complete truth.
Right.
So it's really not truth.
This is sort of the thing going on, like in our birth state, Illinois, right? Illinois is decommissioning nuclear, but not replacing it with anything, and it drives me crazy because it's like, well, you're pursuing zero emissions, and Schellenberger does a fantastic talk. He holds up a Rubik's Cube. He's like, this is the amount of uranium you need to power a household forever, right? For its lives. And then you look at the juxtaposition between a solar field, which is immense, and a nuclear power plant, which, I mean, I'm not going to vacation there. It's an eyesore. I get it, but doesn't take up nearly as much room.
Yeah.
But this battle or this debate on nuclear, I don't even know why we have it in the first place.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, I do know.
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And Michael's a good friend. I have a PBS show that I host, a talk show called Energy Switch.
Yeah.
2 guests on every episode. We just recorded season 7.
Mm-hmm.
We're in 110 million households now. It's on podcast. Michael's on season 1.
Okay.
On nuclear.
Apocalypse Never. I mean, I've read it like 3 or 4 times.
Great book.
It's great.
He was there, pro-nuclear, Michael Schellenberger, and we had a nuclear physicist, anti-nuclear, on the show.
What?
And that's probably one of our most
off about the trade he selected in life.
No, he had real reasons, and this is where you go. This is good.
Okay.
Yeah, his perspective, again, it was 7 seasons ago, was we aren't going to be able to scale it fast enough.
Interesting.
To address climate.
Okay.
It doesn't have emissions. We all agreed. So let's back up a step now. What you're describing is a really important energy principle. It's called energy density.
Mm-hmm.
So bang for the buck.
Right.
How much Michael holds up the cube? I usually I describe a pellet.
Yeah, where I had that, sorry to cut you off, the one thing that I joked about, we were talking about this when I showed my boys your TED Talk, when you immediately start with kale, and they're like, I'm out. I'm like, no, just stay in. He's not a kale guy. Just, he's using it as an example. Just hold tight.
Yeah, that was a TED Talk to 1,100 college kids, and I brought food in as a way to illustrate density. Kale and cow.
Right.
By unit, if I by volume, it's going to take a lot of kale.
Right.
To have the caloric density. And food is just energy.
Yeah.
Kilocalories. The caloric density of meat. Okay. Now, if you really push it, and I didn't want to because we're keeping it high level and simple, natural gas is much denser than oil.
Okay.
Let me explain that. Gas can't be denser than oil. The main measurement of energy density is weight. Mm-hmm. Energy per unit weight. Okay. So, let's leave it there. Energy per unit weight. When I take a bunch of natural gas and condense it into a pound or a kilogram, it's a lot of hydrogen.
Okay.
CH4.
Okay.
A pound of natural gas and a pound of oil, which is more carbon, there's more energy content in the pound of natural gas because of the hydrogen.
Okay.
Versus the carbon. Okay.
I got to go back to high school physics. But...
Okay. Now, you can't weigh everything.
Right.
We can't weigh the sun and the wind. So how are we going to measure their density? So a really smart guy named Václav Smil, a Canadian, figured out, well, let's do it by unit area.
Okay.
We'll call it surface power density.
Mm-hmm.
energy per unit area, watts per meter squared. How much energy does a square meter of Earth produce? And you described it. The solar field, it takes a tremendous amount of solar panels to collect a certain amount of energy. Much less area to generate the same energy from nuclear.
Right.
Because uranium and thorium, which are the radioactive elements that we stuff into fuel rods. So I use a single pellet of uranium, centimeter tall, half centimeter. There's enough energy in that uranium pellet, little pellet, think of a deer pellet,
Right.
to drive a car from New York to LA back to Dallas. Wow. One pellet. And you know how much gasoline that would take.
Yeah.
And gasoline's really dense.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is, this is, again, not judgment physics.
Yeah.
Some energy sources win the physics competition.
Yeah.
They just got lucky.
Right.
Okay.
Some are LeBron and some are the JB kid at the local high school. I get it. Yeah.
Me. So I can create a lot more electricity from nuclear power. And again, what does that do? It's what you're doing. The common nuclear power generation is fission. We're splitting uranium and thorium, creates a lot of heat. That heat is used to do what? Boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, and run a generator. We take those inside a reactor in our first film switch. Okay? So it's just the same as burning coal or natural gas. Heat. It's just a heat source. But that, because there's so much energy density there, I can create a tremendous amount of electricity from a very small footprint.
Mm-hmm.
I have to use a lot more land to deploy the solar panels and the wind turbines, and those don't come from thin air.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do a lot of mining to get the metals to construct the turbines, the coppers and the other composite metals, the panels, and the batteries, which batteries are just metal.
Right.
They're cations and anions is metal, to make the batteries, to back all of that up, to make it reliable. So you're looking at a tremendous amount of Earth resources, 600 to 700% more Earth resources to generate electricity from solar and wind than natural gas and coal. Okay, 6 times more Earth resources. And this is really important. This concept of energy density, again, not judgment, but we don't need as much stuff to get the energy, the caloric, the kale and the cow.
Right.
I have to eat a lot of kale.
Yeah.
And I actually don't mind kale. I don't mind kale, but
I'm over it, man.
I know.
I tried doing it. It's just like,
you don't have to, but seaweed or whatever, pick your favorite.
No, the dried seaweed thing, that trend, that ship has sailed the potato household.
But so I want to, let's loop it back. That matters. Nuclear power, let's say, and we've had it around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We've had it on warships,
yeah,
aircraft carriers and submarines. 5, 6, 7 decades.
Yeah.
They float.
Yeah.
It's a nuclear power plant on a boat.
We had a guy on, he coincidentally from Illinois as well. He gave us the entire history of nuclear. It is fascinating.
It's awesome.
It's a military technology.
It's awesome.
It's amazing.
But why can you go down in a submarine for 2 or 3 months? And my cousin graduated 3rd from the Naval Academy. Was 3rd in command of an attack sub. They'd be down 2 to 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Never have to fill up with gas.
Right.
Because it's nuclear. There's a little nuclear reactor down there that's generating heat, boiling water, making steam, and turning that cool propeller.
And my hunch is your cousin doesn't have like any sort of ooze leaking from his ears or like a third arm growing out of his back or anything like that.
He's pretty intelligent. In fact, he was CFO for Starbucks.
Okay.
Now he's the CFO for the huge Boeing, investment system, whatever it's called. Smart guy. He's definitely really smart. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about radiation.
Okay.
There's this fear. So why don't we like nuclear?
Yeah.
There's a fear of radiation. It was trained into me.
Okay.
When I was young, we were in the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
Nuclear, right? Nuclear was terrifying. Weapons, it's different from electricity. Yes. Okay. Different. Atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs, different from electricity generation. Both nuclear. We would do drills in kindergarten, get under our little desk to train for a nuclear attack. Okay, because I knew that little desk would protect me from a nuclear attack.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, that's what we did. Baked in. Kids today, young people, haven't been trained to be scared of nuclear.
Right.
They've been trained to be scared of the climate
Mm-hmm.
and climate change and all the potential impacts of that. Okay.
When you were young, is that saying that you sort of equate the climate, quote unquote, fear with the nuclear fear that you as a kid? Are you?
We were trained.
Okay.
We were, through my schooling, nuclear war was an ever-present danger. Okay. And it's real.
Mm-hmm.
It really was.
Right.
Bay of Kennedy. I mean, okay.
The embargo that Kennedy had with Cuba.
My lifetime growing up. It's in me. Anybody born, I was born in the late 50s. Anybody born in the 60s, it's in you.
Okay.
Kids today, through their lifetimes, your sons and daughters, I promise, have heard about climate and climate fear. I promise. Even if you describe your neighborhood, even if it's a private school, you pick the teachers, it's still there.
Right.
It's in their lives. And we could talk, if you want to, about the realities of human warming, but also the extreme weather impacts of those. I'm happy to go there with you if we want to. But let's just set that over there for now. So there they sit. And so when I am in a school, and I lecture all the time around in universities, I was at USC and Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Trinity University in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't pick easy ones necessarily. I could ask the students in an audience, how many of you think that climate change is an existential threat?
Right.
Almost all hands will go up. I'll say, what does that mean to you? Somebody will volunteer. It means a threat to our existence. Well, that's right. Existential.
Yeah. That's.
What do you mean a threat to our existence? Human existence. What do you mean by that? Humans won't exist as I push them. I say, okay, when? In the next 15 years.
Yeah.
Humanity's gone.
Right.
Okay. We just made a pretty big leap from the reality of anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases and a physical trapping of heat to an existential threat to humanity.
Right.
Okay. That's the fear that's been baked in. And logic leaves when you're scared.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
The beginning of knowledge is to do away with fear. That's when knowledge can start to happen. It's very hard to be knowledgeable and logical and think when you're terrified.
Right.
Kids are depressed. I'm talking about in the rich world.
Yeah.
Those 1.3 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's set aside the 7 billion. They don't have this as much.
Okay.
Or at all. They have different priorities.
Right. They got other problems that they have to.
Big ones.
Yeah.
The ones we don't struggle with.
Right.
Really important point here.
Right.
They have other issues. So the 1.3 billion of us, depressed, some suicidal, not getting married, don't want to have kids. There's a whole...
Not in shape. Mm-hmm. Eating terribly.
Potentially. So there's a whole fallout from what happens with fear. And that's something that education has to lean into.
Yeah.
And begin to be more completely factual about the relationship of all the things we've been describing, Dan. And you're pulling at my heartstrings here.
Yeah.
Because I speak with a lot of these young people on our so nuclear.
Yeah.
They're not scared of it. You can Google it. You can look at articles.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
The guest, Emmett Penny, that we had last week was adamant that it is a generational dynamic. Yes. And he went into like the whole thing. And
he's great.
The way that Emmett described it was fascinating.
Yes.
And really caught me off guard too, because it's not like I sit around at home, talk to my kids and my kids' friends about nuclear, but after Emmett's show,
you should.
I'm going to.
You need
to.
It's
what I do.
Yeah, in fact, on our PBS show, season 3, I think.
Okay.
we had invited a nuclear engineering. We always do an episode with young people,
Yeah.
students or young pros.
Okay.
We had invited a nuclear engineering student from the University of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And then another young woman, they're both female, woman who was doing CCS, but had been a petroleum engineer.
Okay.
Well, the nuclear engineering student, when we invited her from the University of Wisconsin, she had been Miss Wisconsin when we invited her. That's great. Let's have her on. By the time she's on our show, she was Miss America.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Grace Stinky.
Okay.
So here's Grace Stinky. She brought her crown.
She's crown in one hand, nuclear reactor in the
Very tall,
Yeah.
extremely well-spoken. They both were brilliant, by the way. Brilliant young people. Pro-nuclear, big time. She made her whole year of her Miss America tour about nuclear energy.
Interesting.
Major proponent for it. And I start looking broader than that. We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. So this is a moment in time. This is a moment where nuclear power, the generation of electricity from using radioactive elements, can rise again and will, I think. It is in the world, but not in the rich world yet because of that baked-in fear. Russia and China are building 70% of the world's nuclear reactors today. And they're not one or two. They're building dozens, and a lot more on the books. What's that radioactivity fear that people were so scared of? On our first film, I take you into 2 nuclear reactors.
Okay.
Both in Texas, Comanche Peak, South Texas Project. We released this in 2012. We filmed South Texas Project first
Okay.
to show you some of the concerns about, nuclear, whatever. And then Fukushima Daiichi happened.
Right around that time?
That time.
Oh, my God. Okay.
So we said, we got to go back and do.
Maybe we'll do an episode on natural gas.
Well, security of nuclear. The first one was more about how the systems work and all that.
Okay.
So we go to Comanche Peak. There are 2 reactors at South Texas Project, 2 at Comanche Peak. Texas has 4 nuclear reactors generating electricity 24/7, 360. So we take you into Comanche Peak. I put on a dosimeter, which measures the radioactivity I'm going to receive in the reactor that day. We go into the containment room. This is the 3-foot thick concrete wall with rebar the size of my arm throughout it that contains the possibility of an internal accident or, more importantly, an external attack.
Okay.
Airplane could fly into it.
Sure.
Some
Missile.
concrete chips off, but this thing is safe. So we're in that room.
Okay.
Here's the reactor core. Okay, down there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And here's the dosimeter. Woo!
Yeah.
I just must be getting radiated.
Yeah.
But I only am here a few hours. Blah, blah, blah. We come out. We look at it. 0.
Literally 0.
0. No radiation the whole time I'm in there. Inside of a nuclear reactor.
Right.
And there's a term for that. It's like a millisievert or something is what that little thing is called.
Awesome.
I got more radiation that day when I left the building than when I was in it. Okay? Because there's natural radiation in the world.
Right.
So we want to stay below 100 of these things, but just call them RADs for ease of. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the United States of America regulates nuclear power. It's been around a while. The precursor to that, which was formed in the 50s under Dwight Eisenhower, was there to accelerate the deployment and build out of nuclear power. That lasted 20 years. We built 100 and something reactors. Since that time, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is there to protect us against all costs. So they say 100 or less. Well, 100 is hard to achieve in anything.
Okay.
And the reality is most of those reactors give you 1 to 2, not 100. 1 to 2 is none. It's no radiation. I get more than that flying on an airplane internationally every single time.
Yeah.
Going to get an X-ray.
Right.
Going through the X-rays at the airport.
Yeah, the airport security.
Granites. The natural radiation in the world is greater than this, way greater than the standards we're requiring for our nuclear power plants. So the NRC has this code
Okay.
that it lives by, and most of the world does, that is protecting us to levels that are silly.
It's like
Net
the
zero
equivalent of, like,
radiation.
putting kids in like the bubble, right? And then like wrapping them in bubble wrap and putting them in the bubble and sending them in the basement because
An N95 face mask with another one on, and yet a third that you duct tape down.
hey,
Okay.
a
Ooh.
plastic bag over your head.
So get busy living, because so the levels of now, I'm not trying to make light of it. Nuclear power is the safest kilowatt hour ever generated in terms of human lives.
Right.
We've been 3 Mile Island didn't happen, but could have worked. Chernobyl happened. Human and technology, completely weird cooling system. Fukushima Daiichi, those are the 3 bigs. Fukushima Daiichi wasn't a nuclear power plant accident. It was a tidal wave from a tsunami and an earthquake, wiped out
Yeah.
the backup generators whose diesel tanks sat on the surface, so they couldn't flood the core with water. It got flooded with salt water. Salt water is more conductive
Mm-hmm.
than fresh water. There was a meltdown.
Was that the rationale? So your nuclear scientist who was anti-nuclear,
Yes.
was that their rationale?
Scale. Climate and scale.
That's it?
He's passionate for climate. Fine.
Okay.
Everybody's entitled to be passionate. That will not address climate change. So we're using it he felt we were using it as kind of this straw man, so to speak. Like, let's just do nuclear. He's saying, well, we'll never get there to scale, so that won't address climate. And maybe he's right, but the world's building a lot of nuclear now.
Right.
And we're getting really close too.
Yeah. What do you think is
Bipartisan, by the way. I don't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but it's bipartisan. The Biden administration at the end, the last year to year and a half, was pro-nuclear.
Was there do you know, or do you have a feeling on what changed their mind? Like why they flipped the way they did?
Partly because there was an election coming up,
Yeah.
and it's a broader stance. So there's politics
It was
always,
moderate.
no matter who.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Democrats only do that. Republicans do it too. I think they were realizing they couldn't deploy enough money. Even the IRA, which started off as supposedly $300 to $400 billion, ends up $1.2 trillion or up to $3 trillion, depending on who you ask. They couldn't deploy enough money to build all of the low emission stuff,
Mm-hmm.
solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries, which, by the way, we don't build.
Right.
We don't mine. This is back to that whole California story.
Yeah.
We're buying all that stuff on the market, and the market is Asia,
Yeah.
mostly China, not secure. So I think the Biden administration was saying this isn't secure,
Mhm.
and it's very expensive. Nuclear has to be part of this story for no emissions, dense electricity generation. And we can talk about AI and data centers, but I think they're seeing the handwriting on the wall, and the Republicans like it. So let's embrace this bipartisan moment.
Yeah.
Everybody's okay with nuclear, not the 3 sigma on either side.
Right.
Set them over there.
Yeah.
This kind of 1 and 2 sigma, this 66 to 80%. We're okay with it.
Are you bullish then on permitting reform for nuclear?
No.
So talking with Emmett, I just, once again, you say it's like putting this amazing gift in a cage and saying you can look at it and you can, think about it. You just can't have it. It's stuck there. Is there like, why are you bearish on the permitting reform as it relates to nuclear?
Just the history of it. We've been so focused on net zero emissions, ultimate protection, that I'm not convinced
Okay.
that we will be able to evolve the NRC to make protection of radiation a component of what they do. Maybe not 100 even, maybe 200, even though you're only getting 1 or 2.
And just so I understand, it sounds like, and maybe this is a cynical take, it sounds like the NRC has protective measures in place that effectively prohibit any participation, right? The rules are so stringent on purpose.
Correct.
No, okay.
Correct, but it's not just them. That's
not-
almost a global.
That's a global thing.
Yeah, except China and Russia,
Except China.
who are building them. And that's okay. I mean, I hope China's technology and Russia's technology, and there's lots of different nuclear
Right.
technologies out there, are And India is building them too now with their own technology.
Interesting.
The densest population on Earth needs the densest energy.
Right.
Go, India, go.
Right.
I hope it's safe technology. There are a lot of other things that can happen if you lose a nuclear reactor.
Right.
It's not the radiation from the process itself that we need to be concerned about. It's protecting the fission products that come out of those fuel rods once they've been through a cycle and are spent. So I hope the NRC and the Trump administration seems to be very keen on rewriting the NRC's protocols so that in addition to protection, there is also the motivation to advance our deployment of nuclear in this country again.
Yeah. I mean, and relating that to the generative AI and the hyperscalers, I mean, I increasingly hear the tech bros, so like Meta, Facebook, or Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, going down the nuclear route because they're not going to wait around.
Hello, Bill Gates.
Right. And so hopefully Bezos and his crew can sort of just figure out like what a blueprint is that the government can adopt at scale. But
the minute Bill Gates came out with his book and then got behind TerraPower, which is one of the small modular reactor companies, NuScale and others, Oklahoma. I don't want to brand, I'm not here to advertise.
The Oklahoma, the lady that run, I'm going to forget her name. But she's an Oklahoma native. She spoke at the Ham Institute on SMRs and what Oklahoma's doing.
Yeah.
And by far is one of the most entertaining, fascinating
It's incredible.
presentations. It's awesome.
California. So when Gates said we're going to be pushing into nuclear, you go, okay, nuclear could happen.
Okay.
Because tech now feels a little safer to tell the truth. The truth is, the tech sector is the largest consuming industry in the world, of energy. Of mostly electricity, but not just.
Right.
Every Amazon truck that comes to your door and run on batteries. Yeah. So let's just say tech consumes a lot of energy. Everybody wants to blame the producers of energy. Well, just the coal, oil, and gas producers.
Yeah, just those.
And sue them for all the climate issues. Well, maybe it's the consumers too.
Right.
It's those of us who want a lot of energy to do the things we do. It's everybody.
Yeah, people got so up in arms, and once again, I don't want to go down the political route, but Trump said something along the lines of maybe we don't need $30, maybe $2. Remember that statement?
Oh, yeah.
And I was looking at our room upstairs. We call it the frat house. It's where, we got the TV, the PlayStation, all the shenanigans, and it's probably used once a month. I'm like, he's probably right. It's much more of a consumer component.
How many pairs of blue jeans do you really need? And it takes 3 gallons of gasoline to get that blue jean to your closet. And we show that in our first film. So you come back, though, to this permitting. When the tech sector said, we need it. And why did they say that? They were all solar and wind because they could say that and there was no consequences. They were buying credits from who? I don't know, somebody. But the credit market, it's
getting better.
Maybe
it's getting better.
Maybe it's improving with its integrity, but let's say it is. But they were buying those credits for a while. Along comes first data centers. Smaller, bigger. Now AI centers. So every time, if any young people are listening, every time you pull out that phone and do a chat, think about the climate. Tie that phone in your brain to climate change because it is causing a data center somewhere or an AI search somewhere to whir, and that whirring is putting out CO2 emissions. Yeah. Okay. A lot of energy to do that. So tech said, we can't say solar and wind anymore. These data centers, let's call them the hyperscalers. The big ones that are being built now. You know how much electricity they consume?
We've studied this extensively. Yeah. We have presentations. The U.S. needs a larger energy boat. We have American coal is cleaner than Chinese solar. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
We have the grid and the infrastructure needs a facelift. The sheer amount of electricity that is anticipated to be demanded, and frankly, the water component.
Right.
Like, I don't think people necessarily appreciate what
The water
demand is going to look like.
and the air conditioning.
40% goes to cooling. Yeah.
And now they're doing liquid cooling less. But for our listeners, your listeners, let's just say one of the hyperscalers, one of the centers, and you'll drive by them on the highway and not know it. Oh, that's a big warehouse.
Yeah.
One of those, the same amount of electricity as a nice mid-sized town.
Right.
Kind of up to a small city.
Yeah.
A town.
Right.
Okay.
There's 5,000 of them right now in the United States.
And growing.
Right.
So, and guess what? It's not just any electron. 99.99% reliability.
Yeah.
It can't go off.
Mm-hmm.
That's a security issue if it does.
Right.
So how do you get that? You don't get it from, again, not judgment physics, things that stop blowing or shining. It's really hard to get it from big batteries. You literally can't build enough of them. And you got to mine for all that crap. And where are they going to go when they wear out? Blunk.
Yeah.
You recycle some of them, maybe. It's expensive. So they said, no, let's get nuclear. We're going to get nuclear reactors dedicated. And some of the first hints of this to the public was 3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
The one that went away.
Right.
And Jane Fonda made her film, A China Syndrome.
That's right.
And it scared the crap out of all of us. And we shut down our nuclear system in this country. We continued to produce electricity, but no new ones till a couple of years ago in, bless Georgia's heart.
Right, Georgia.
Southern Company. But so there you sit. Now they're saying we need them. Let's go nuclear. Let's get a dedicated small modular reactor. Those range from 30 to 75 megawatts per module. Need 100 megawatts for a data center, 200, 300. One of our PBS shows we dedicated to data centers. Go check it out. It's incredibly overwhelming. And so
the numbers get
they're
wild.
Yeah.
Immediately.
They're they're way up here. Now will that happen? Probably not, because we always do straight lineology.
Right.
And it rarely does that because we figure things out. AI can figure out AI. But Dan, it's going to be a lot.
Right.
And it's coming quickly. If we don't do it, guess who wins the AI data center war? Not us.
China.
So this is kind of like the Cold War.
Right.
We have to participate and succeed, which means always on electricity.
Right.
There's really only 3 ways to do that. There's 4.
Okay.
Hydro.
Okay. Very regionally.
Regional and droughts.
Right. Yeah.
Coal. Okay. You're hearing the president mention coal again. Guess who uses a pile of coal? Asia. Most of the world's coal. Germany's come back to some coal when they shut down their nukes. But coal, okay, SOx, NOx, particulates, mercury. Not talking about the climate even. Got to scrub all that out. Natural gas and nuclear. Okay, natural gas and nuclear. Tech went nukes. Permitting.
Yeah.
Supply chains. Some fear that's coming back again. Well, let's go to natural gas. So we're going to be building a tremendous number of natural gas power plants to drive our own data centers. That molecule, that methane molecule, is going to have demand on it like never before. Right. Natural gas is the most versatile of our fuels. We can make electricity with it by burning it. We cook with it. We need it for making plastics. Okay, we need it for burning to make cement and steel,
fertilizer,
the process of creating fertilizers from methane and complexing them to get to ammonia.
Right.
And ammonia is the primary feedstock into fertilizers. It's so versatile. Do we really want to be burning methane to run my cell phone to look at dancing cats?
Right.
Really? I don't know.
But there'll be some really entertaining dancing cat video.
And maybe nobody said this before to you, and I haven't heard it said, but I am not a big fan of using methane, natural gas, to run these data centers.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. I think it's going to create a demand on that product that's going to cause the price to go way up. Right. Demand's going to exceed supply. We're going to be using it for things that are they really the most critical for natural gas to do?
Right.
There's so many other things we need that for. Let's build nukes.
Yeah.
They're perfect for it.
That's where we agree. Yeah, I see where you're going with this. I was getting a little bit nervous. The one mix too is the directive of the Trump administration, which I agree with, is the United States is the energy epicenter of the world, and particularly with the geopolitical tensions in Eastern Europe. Europe has no other choice, right? If they want to make a sound decision, they're going to rely on U.S. LNG and the natural gas market here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to back up, they have built out a lot of solar and wind, even where it's not sunny and windy.
Right.
Which, bless Germany's heart, great wind, terrible sun,
Right.
like Seattle.
You're not going to Germany to get a tan.
No, or to have efficient solar panels. Right. Capacity factors in the teens.
Yeah.
What does that mean? If the capacity is 100 of this solar power plant, we're generating about 12 units of electricity with it. That's the capacity factor. 12 out of its capacity of 100 because it's not sunny.
Right.
And it's a higher latitude. The winter, it's just not a great place for the sun. Neither is Seattle. Good for wind.
Right.
But Germany and other places, they need affordable electricity. Their electricity is more expensive than California's.
Particularly given that Germany is, well, it was, and I hope they figured out to maintain the industrial center of Europe.
Oh.
Well, now it's just not becoming a competitive economy. It's just.
No, industries are fleeing.
Yeah.
Auto, they're great auto industry.
Right. BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes, just.
All of it. And so it's terrifyingly sad. So it's sad because they're our allies and we love Europe.
Yeah.
And it's terrifyingly sad because their economies are suffering.
Yeah.
I want to take you back to 2007. It's an important year.
Okay.
In 2007, Angela Merkel,
Mm-hmm.
Chancellor of Germany, with the German people, instituted something called Energiewende.
Wanda.
Yes, Energiewende, all one word. I'm not probably pronouncing it.
Yeah.
The Germans are going, oh my God.
Yeah. They just cringed.
Yeah.
That's okay. We don't have any German.
Energiewende,
anyway.
which means their new energy policy, 07.
Okay.
Germans created it. They led the Western Europe, and they live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, shut down coal, shut down nuclear, don't drill for our own natural gas and our own shales, ramp up wind, ramp up solar. Save the planet from climate change. Let's go. 2007. If you go look at a graph of 3 major economies in the world, their GDP growth through time.
Mm-hmm.
The United States, up and to the right.
Right. Yep.
China, steeper up and to the right.
Right.
Had a little kink in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Europe, up and to the right till 2007. Flat since then. A little bit of uptick in the last few years. Flat. China now creates more GDP than Europe. Yeah. They passed it a year ago. And they'll pass the U.S. So that policy that translated down throughout the economy of expensive energy, which underpins economic growth and health, has had an outcome unintentional. They were told, and they continue to be told by a few people, but particularly led by the IEA, Fatih Birol, who runs the IEA, solar and wind can be more affordable and more reliable. Let's go. And it's neither.
Why do you think the IEA takes such a stance? Like, why? What is it? I mean,
well, you can be the cynical answer.
Yeah, I want the cynical answer.
Who pays the bills? Who started it? The U.S. and in Western Europe. Yep. The U.S. has been kind of going, So he meets with all the leaders of West. They keep the IEA going.
Yeah.
So follow the money there.
Okay.
And then Fatih Birol is really smart. He's a smart economist, and he's a good person. Okay. But 4 years ago, when I testified to Manchin's hearing, that same hearing, there were 4 witnesses. Me, Mark Mills, Fatih Birol, and somebody from one of the NGOs.
Okay.
It was right, and Fatih Birol said some things in that hearing I think that motivated me to say factory complete.
Okay.
Actually, if I'm thinking, I think that actually was my motivator.
What was he saying?
That's when they put out, 4 months later, they put out their net zero report from the IEA in the summer of 21. I think it was the summer of 21.
As if we didn't need enough other crap to be worried about with the high.
And the net zero report said, here's what it would take to go to net zero. It's kind of was written that way. Here's what it would have to take. One of the things that would have to have happened is global energy consumption flattens. All energy consumption in the world flattens. And at the same time, the economy grows.
Yeah.
And energy consumption grew, so they didn't miss those. Or not energy consumption. The economy grew.
Right.
And people grew. So population and economy, energy consumption. And the CEO of Marathon called me. Lee calls and said, Scott, I need you to talk to our board about this report. I said, when? He goes, now, this week. They're meeting. I said, I haven't even read it.
Right.
I read it, and I showed the basics of that thing, that set of assumptions of flat, everything else growing this magic gap.
Right.
How are you going to grow an economy with people growing, industrialization, with no more energy consumption? It literally has never happened in the world and won't again. That thing became the roadmap to Glasgow that year. And Glasgow was the COP, the Conference of the Parties. Right. It was held in Glasgow, Scotland that year. It became the roadmap. For the 3 to 4 years that have followed that, this net zero theme at all costs, and the costs are extreme, Dad.
Right.
They're extreme. They're extreme to the economies, and they're extreme, therefore, to the environment. We are harming our environment by harming our economies in Western Europe and the U.S.
Right.
We've managed to get through it. We didn't go as far as Europe. In the meantime, China,
they could care less.
No, they could care more. They're thrilled. They're thrilled with what we're doing.
Oh, right, because it makes them more competitive, right? It gives them the edge.
We'll just keep building your crap.
Yeah.
And we're shipping it to you.
Sure.
Our economy keeps going.
Yeah.
We're using coal. It's all good. Vladimir.
Yeah, Vlad.
Xi Jinping. Hey, let's bring Narendra into this. Narendra Modi from India. He's looking left and right. Let's get him to look east, Narendra. Mohammed bin Salman. Let's all chat. There's an axis forming here.
Right.
It's formed of resources, manufacturing, and demand.
That's one of the...
Okay. Resources, Russia. Yeah. Manufacturing, China. Demand, India.
Right. That's the BRICS. Yeah.
Incredible. Well, you bring in Brazil and it's incredible.
I mean, when we bring up that point too, and I want to bring it full circle with, I'm going to take you up on your offer, and you're probably going to be like, oh God, the human warming element. Yeah. There's in the debates, in the conversations that we have, there's always the but, right? Yeah, but the human warming element. Yeah. And certainly, as you point out correctly, and I think you've led the way on this, of you entertain the idea, you listen, you surely debate it. We struggle, as I think the industry does, to negate, or negate's not the right word, to mitigate the human warming aspect of the debate. Mm-hmm. Can you address that?
Yeah. Let me take a couple minutes.
Yeah,
it will. We have been releasing CO2 emissions since we started burning fossil fuels, and before that, right? Burning wood, dung, and hay, the precursors to fossil fuels,
right?
Carbon stuff, plants. Let's call them carbohydrates, okay? And nature converted carbohydrates to hydrocarbons for us. It's the same chemical makeup.
Okay,
it's just denser. So you take plants and nature, cook them, and through time, pressure, and heat, make them into coal, liquids, and gas. We've been burning those things, humans, for all of human history, since we discovered fire, putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Because there are a lot more people now, and we are industrializing and needing more energy. In the last 50 to 75 years, that combustion has accelerated, and we are emitting more and more CO2 into the atmosphere. The CO2 in the atmosphere has gone from pre-industrial stages of 280 parts per million today to around 420 parts per million.
Wow. Okay.
280 to 420. Now you will say some 420 parts per million, Scott.
Yeah.
Put 420 ping pong balls into a tank of 1 million ping pong balls and you won't be able to find them. That's completely factual. And
Okay.
it's factually complete that when you go from 280 to 420, you've increased the percentage of CO2 in the atmosphere more than 50%, or plus or minus 50% increase.
Okay.
Also completely factual. You'll hear one side say that, the other side say this.
Right.
They're both true.
That's how they frame it.
That's how they frame it. The evidence is reasonably clear, and there's some physicists that I like and respect tremendously who won't agree with what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Because there's other physicists I like and respect who do agree that would say the evidence is reasonably clear that there's been about a 1 degree C increase in the temperature of the planet, which is really hard to measure, by the way.
Yeah.
I can't even measure my own body within that accuracy with a thermometer in my ear.
Right.
We measure the planet.
Yeah.
With all these thermometers, and we've moved them around, and we've got created heat islands. So there's all the challenge in the day, but great scientists have tried to take all that. We've warmed it about 1.1 degrees C. If we continue along the path we're on, and we will, because the demand for energy is going to continue, and the world needs coal, oil, and natural gas.
Right.
Those 7 billion people are going to burn coal, oil, and natural gas, and they should be able to do that to lift themselves up to economic prosperity.
Right. The United States does not have the moral authority to tell another country don't experience.
They won't listen. They won't listen.
Right.
They're not listening. And we didn't.
Right.
So leaving that aside, we're going to burn more of these fossil fuels. So we're going to go up more. So we'll probably add another degree to probably 1 to 2 degrees more, potentially. C, not Fahrenheit.
Over the next 100 years?
50 to 100 years.
Okay.
50 years. And I'll tell you why. You want to talk about population.
Okay.
Cool topic.
Okay.
But let's say 50.
I've never seen anyone get so enthralled with population, but okay.
50 years.
50 years.
We're going to increase. I don't think we can do anything about that personally. And that's not a defeatist attitude. I think for 30 years, the Conference of the Parties, starting with Kyoto protocols and others, through Glasgow, has tried. And we've had zero effect. It's literally, the slope is unchanged of CO2 emissions in the world. It's unchanged. Okay. So, CO2 emissions are going up. We're causing those emissions to increase by burning fossil fuels. Completely clear. The data is completely clear on that. Nobody argues with that. The warming will continue for a while. There's a lot of complexities to what CO2 does in the atmosphere. Does it go linear? No. Just set that aside. So what are the impacts of that? Right. Okay. What are the impacts on humans? What would cause us not to exist?
Right.
An existential threat. What would cause extreme weather events? The leading body in the world studying these things across universities and think tanks and national labs globally is the IPCC. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They don't do the research. They accumulate all of the research. That's
more like a meta review, correct?
They bring it all together. And every so often they put out a report. It's called an AR. The most recent one is AR6. Okay. About 3 years ago. AR6. And there are several working groups in the IPCC. They do different things. Working group 1 is the really technical working group that looks at the impacts, the science of climate warming, climate change, and the impacts of that on weather. Working group 1. AR6, working group 1. Stay with me.
Yeah.
In that report is chapter 12.
Chapter 12.
And I would like your viewers to just go Google. They made a couple of little grams of CO2 in Google. AR6 working group 1, chapter 12.
Okay.
That'll come up. There's going to be these little boxes in there, and one of them says expand all sections. So click that box, expand all sections, because these are big reports. Thousands of pages. There are summaries of each of those, executive summaries that are 40 to 50 pages and very political.
Okay.
But the actual data, a really impressive amount of science has been collected into those. And scientists who have come to some agreement about what to put in these reports.
Okay.
Expand all sections. Table 12.12. Okay.
I'm guessing you've reviewed this, right?
Write it down. Okay, table 12.12. So, what does that table show? And again, the climate scientists, some of them are cringing, and others are going, "Yep." And I won't be able to do justice. I'm not a quote climate scientist. I'm a geologist.
Mm-hmm.
Climate scientists, by the way, have come from all different walks of science.
Right.
It's a complex field. It takes all different kinds of people. When people say I'm not a climate scientist, what they really mean is I'm not a climate modeler. I don't take all that stuff and try to model the future temperature and its impacts. I don't do that. So I read their table.
Okay.
And their table says, and I won't have the right word, you got to read them yourself, with a high degree of confidence. That table, a high degree of confidence, meaning statistical confidence, 90 to 95% confident. Here are all the weather impacts that can happen from climate change. It's down the left-hand side of it. Here, I'll go your left.
Okay.
All right. Today, here's all the impacts that could happen. Droughts, drought intensity and duration, storms and hurricanes, intensity of those storms, rate of sea level rise.
Sterling, is it possible to pull that up on the screen?
What was that?
The chapter 12, AR6, chapter 12.
AR6, Working Group 1,
Working Group 1.
Chapter 12.
Okay, we're going to pull that up.
You want to take a break and do it? Or
No, can you pull it up on that screen?
it'll take a minute.
It'll just take a minute. I'll pop up.
Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah. And so, Sterling, when you do that, expand all sections, and then you have to scroll way down to table 12.12
Okay,
because it's deep in there.
okay,
And when you do, we'll talk about it.
okay,
But what you're going to see in that table are 3 columns.
okay,
They're the weather impacts. Column 1 is things that are emerged today from the historical norm.
okay.
The historical norm it's just not an ideal climate. Fires have come and gone each
Right.
year. Big hurricanes and other things have come and gone. Snow and snow melt have come and gone. Rate of sea level rise is increasing, but is it increasing? Is it accelerating?
Right.
And is it in its increase?
What's the trajectory as opposed to just the
Correct.
trend? Okay.
So you're going to see in that first column today, or when that was written, what has emerged, and then you're going to see what could emerge by 2050,
Okay.
and then by 2100,
Okay.
and you're going to see those 2 columns. So that's, what is that, 25 years from now and 75 years from now. And you're going to see under the most extreme of the 4 climate scenarios. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
8.5. Climate scenario 8.5,
Okay.
which pretty sure few, if any, climate scientists think is going to happen anymore.
He's pulling it up. So it's AR6 working group.
Well, you got to go IPCC,
Okay.
IPCC, AR6, Working Group 1, WG1 should get it. Or Working Group 1 is fine. Working Group 1, Chapter 12. Type in Chapter 12 up there, too, to save yourself some time. Okay, now hit it. Okay, hit it. Now, expand all sections. Whoa, go back. Sterling, you're getting ahead of me. Expand all sections. Okay, they just expanded. Now you're going to have to start scrolling
Oh my God.
to find
Thank
table
God for ChatGPT.
12.12. You're going to have to scroll a lot.
So you just do Control F 12.12?
Maybe they have a search function. I haven't found that conveniently. It's table 12.12, so you're going to keep going.
Okay.
We'll keep talking.
Yeah.
So you're going to see under the 8.5 scenario, which was, say, the hottest that they think is possible,
Okay.
what will emerge in 2050 and what will emerge in 2100. Anything in there that is white space hasn't emerged and won't emerge with a high level
Of comment.
of confidence. Now, words used in the report. Sometimes, and there are different kinds of words that mean statistical things,
Yeah.
might mean a lower level of confidence. It could emerge, So when you read these things, when somebody says to you, or you hear, it's the worst storm on record.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse. Yeah. Storms are getting worse.
Every year. I mean,
every
too,
day.
The hurricanes and every year.
Every day you hear it. Yeah. It's worse and getting worse. It turns out it's not.
Yeah.
Not with a really, really high level of statistical confidence. It's not getting worse yet.
Yeah.
It could.
Mm-hmm.
But the most extreme scenario says it won't.
Mm-hmm.
With a high level of confidence. Now, we'll see if in the next AR they keep the table. Rumor has
they are anticipated to come out.
Well, within a year to two,
okay,
until the U.S. just pulled all of its support
it got
for
doged.
this process.
It got doged? Okay.
Which has a lot of people up in arms.
Yeah.
I'm kind of one of those.
Okay.
I kind of think that we should continue to do great science in climate. I do think the impacts of climate change matter. I do think we have to deal with them.
Yeah.
But while he's still scrolling, let's talk a minute about the cost of that adaptation versus mitigation.
Right.
No, you got to go back into the report. It's up in the report. You're going to have to go way back up into it, but not too far. Oh, man.
There was a table there.
No, you have to get to something, find a table, and it's going to look like that. See this one? Go back up a little bit. Go back the other way. What table is that? Table 12 point. Oh, whoa.
The 12.3.
That's 12.11. Go back down.
We're almost there.
Table 12.11.
Okay.
We want 12.12, so go slowly. The next one that sort of looks like those colors.
I can't believe. No.
That's figure. Keep rolling. We need table. Here it is.
Oh, here we go.
There,
Jackpot.
There it is.
Thanks, Sterling.
So that was easy.
Yeah. That's a thick report, but.
Okay.
Here we go.
Climate impact.
Yep.
Heat and cold.
Yep.
Wet and dry. Wind. Snow and ice. Coastal. Open ocean. Etc.
Yep.
Compact impact driver category. Temperature. Extreme heat. Cold spell. Frost. Precipitation. Flood. Landslide. Aridity. Drought. Fire weather. That's forest fire.
Yeah.
Wind. Speed. Storm. Cyclone. That's hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Snow and ice. Hail. Extreme. Avalanches. Relative sea level. Relative sea level.
Yeah.
Not even.
Relative to what?
Well, I can explain that as a geologist, but there's something called eustatic sea level, which would be global sea level.
Okay.
Open ocean temperature, acidity. The dark colors.
Yep.
Not the light shaded. The dark colors. High degree of confidence that those have emerged.
Okay.
In fact, it says already emerged in the historical period.
Yeah.
So I don't think I misrepresented this.
Nope. No.
Air temperature, extreme heat, and the cold spell. It's gotten warmer, and cold spells have emerged too.
Yeah.
Those have emerged.
Meaning that it's hotter in the summer than it's usually and colder in the winter.
Extremes.
Yeah, extremes.
Fair enough. The data show that.
Okay.
Come down.
It's pretty blank.
To lake, river, and sea ice. And then mean ocean temperature. The ocean is getting warmer too.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Wow.
RCP 8.5.
Okay.
That's the most extreme of 4 scenarios that all the climate modelers ran.
Uh-huh.
That's the most extreme. They've now are recreating the method around which they're going to do this. I'm not a climate scientist. So I'm glad I know this much.
Yeah.
There's a couple people that teach me. Okay. Look what else pops out. Mean precipitation rainfall. We're become highly confident that that's going to emerge from its normal past.
Mm-hmm.
We become vaguely confident or less confident that snow, glaciers, and permafrost could. They're the light shade.
Okay.
We add relative sea level the rate begins to accelerate.
Okay.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. A high level of confidence But when you scroll to the bottom, you'll see what that shading means.
Yeah.
And we add a couple more, maybe ocean salinity, dissolved oxygen. But you go down one more, and then the others, and keep going just a little bit for us, Sterling. So high confidence, except over a few regions. These are all the footnotes in those things. Now here, high confidence of decreasing, high confidence of increase. So sometimes climate drives them up or down. Medium confidence, low confidence in direction of change, which means
Nothing.
well, we don't have any confidence in that yet. It's very low. So the white space is low, the light shaded are medium.
Yep.
Come back up now, Sterling. Oh, good, shrinking a little bit. Look at the white space.
It dominates. Interesting.
And I'm not trying to underplay this. I really am not trying to.
No.
This is the leading scientific body in the world. This is not Scott Tinker
Right.
or some of my buddies. And because I'm actually a person who thinks we are forcing warming.
Okay.
And there are impacts of that. And we see them play out some. But what this says to me, sorry.
No.
We have time.
Yeah, I interpret this as you should be mindful of these things, but you should not overcorrect to the point where it defies the laws of capital discipline and free markets and all the other things that we could utilize right now to find solutions to what these problems would inevitably, if they ever came to be.
And pushing fear
Right.
into young people.
Yeah.
So that
That's a big one.
You know what I'm in the impacts of that. Those impacts are known and they are real. So how there's a couple end members of dealing with these things. One would be to try to mitigate it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're going to mitigate this in the world. I happen to, when I go back to my 4 pillars of the environment and human flourishing, we need energy.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about
Right.
So my climate solutions aren't going to be perfect, but they might help the land, the air, and the water a bit more. Okay, then pure objective functions, CO2 emissions only. Okay, and I want to see the world lift out of poverty so that they can afford to have healthy economies, invest in the environment, and we're not getting the disparity that doesn't end well. So we've kind of looped back to the beginning now.
Mm-hmm.
You got my whole passion train here.
Yeah.
About how these things work together.
This is the mic drop, right? And I mean, from your opinion too, like who's the facilitator, who's the curator of the messaging, right? I think the oil and gas space has gotten so much better. They've improved.
They had a long way to go.
Right. But me and Mike Howard talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate Mike being the leader in terms of what he reports and how he advocates for the space, because he's not apologetic. He's very honest.
Correct.
But he even says like it's the second inning of the ball game.
For your viewers, full disclosure, I sit on Mike Howard's board of directors.
Right.
Full disclosure, I have to do that. He asked me to a couple years ago. I saw his passion around human flourishing.
Yeah.
And the company and Mike himself are fully invested in energy poverty. I said, okay,
I'm in.
I'm in with that guy.
Uh-huh.
If somebody from a solar company had that passion, I'm in with your board too.
Interesting.
Same with nuclear.
Yeah.
I'm agnostic when it comes to that.
Uh-huh.
I'm not agnostic when it comes to physics and economics.
Right.
And what drives these systems. Let's tell the truth, not just completely factual, but factually complete truth, Dan. Let's tell it all so that we can make better decisions.
Yeah.
So this table says to me, kids, you're not going to die in 15 years.
Right.
These are important issues. Get involved with them if they matter to you.
In fact, you could take your time almost figuring out the solutions if they were to happen.
Sort of. Mitigate, adapt.
Yeah.
Okay. Pretty clear studies now from a lot of banks of all kinds. This is going to cost a crap pile of money.
A fortune.
To mitigate. And we probably won't succeed because most of the world is going to burn fossil fuels to do what we did. Okay. Other end member. Adapt.
Yep.
We know you know what you get. I start building big seawalls. I start doing forest fire management processes and practices that are much more rigorous than we do today. I start creating much better alarm systems for hurricanes and cyclones, to
Better technologies.
droughts. Okay. We might start putting water from capturing in rainfall and re-injecting it into the aquifers to recharge the aquifer. These are expensive things. More fire-resistant homes, more energy efficient homes and buildings and structures, better power lines.
Yeah.
We keep building them cheaper.
Right.
And a tree hits them and we spark a fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can go on and forever on mitigation versus adaptation. Adaptation will also be expensive, but I know what I get.
Right.
And it turns out most of the adaptation studies I've read are less expensive than mitigation. And let's do a big one.
Yeah.
3 billion people in the world without much access to energy. So 1 billion with none, another 2 billion with not much. They're living where it's dense. Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, parts of the Middle East, not very dense, some parts of Latin America. Subequatorial.
Mm-hmm.
It's hot.
Right.
What would they like? An air conditioner.
AC unit.
And a home that would keep the cool air in with some insulation. That's adaptation for them. What else would they like? A school.
Yeah.
They would like to have an air-conditioned school with lights that stay on longer than sunlight. They would like to have vehicles that get their kids there and back, like we have for education. They would like to have health clinics where they can go and get served let's not even call it modern healthcare yet, but not primitive healthcare.
Right.
Refrigeration for their vaccines and for their medicines. They would like to have secure food that they don't have to harvest from a local garden when it's raining,
right,
and not when it's not. Crops that are robust like we have, irrigation systems and water. Speaking of water, how about clean water? The reason we have clean water is we clean it up.
Right.
All these things take energy. All of them, a lot of energy to do everything I just described and much more. They might want some clothing not as much as in your kid's playground or mine.
Yeah.
But maybe more than one pair of holy pants.
Right.
Not holy.
Yeah.
Pants with holes in them.
Right.
Okay. These things take energy. It is literally incumbent upon everyone in the world to not put a light bulb in a mud hut, right, but to lift people into prosperity.
Right.
Toby Rice and I have started Energy Corps.
Yeah.
CORPS. What's it going to take? I created the numerical vision for it. Instead of net zero, I didn't try to replace net zero. I would, every year at the end of the year, I spend 2 or 3 weeks and dig into data.
Okay.
It's my fun time.
That's what you do during Christmas break?
I do. And I go to our Michigan place and hide, and I don't, grow a beard, merge data sets, dive in deep. This year was looking at what it would take. Conveniently, just for numbers, it turns out the average of that developed world, the one we talked about, is 50 megawatt hours of energy consumption and $50,000 of income.
Okay.
50-50.
Yeah.
Okay. The average of the rich world. U.S. is more.
Yeah.
But you take the 1.3 billion, 50 megawatt hours, 50 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else on the planet is less.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some people that make more than that in India, but India averaged is less. Okay. Right. We want to get everybody on the planet 50 megawatt hours at 50 grand per capita. Per capita.
Right.
Let's go.
Okay.
Now that is a whole different vision.
Yeah.
Than mud huts.
Uh-huh.
Okay. By when, Scott?
And that just started? Like, where are you guys at? It
50-50-50. So 50-50. We announced it at Sarah Week in March.
Okay.
I did it in December and January. Toby's got these cool ideas about energy poverty, and we've made a film about it, Switch On.
Okay.
Released it in January 20. So we were out in front of this by quite a bit with that film. So then I said, by when? Dan, by when?
Right.
Well, net zero is going to be by 2050. Can we do it by 2050? And I plug a bunch of data in, and hell no.
It's like, 2042 or
Can't
something.
get close.
Something arbitrary.
So
Wait, you can't get close so far beyond 2050.
So I start looking at what really drives energy demand. Humans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Human population and our acceleration into modern societies.
Okay.
Growth. That's what drives demand. People and productivity.
Okay.
Energy underpins economies.
Yeah.
Okay. So by when? Well, when we did a show on our PBS series about population, incredibly fascinating discussion.
Okay.
Go watch it. 25 minutes.
Okay.
And I invited them on because I had read in some publications about what they were saying. The demographers of the world are saying, hey, folks, when you look at all the nations on Earth, our fertility rates
Yes.
are coming down.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at fertility rates against wealth on a plot, you see that the wealthier we are, the lower our fertility rates. So there's fertility rates coming down, wealth.
Yep.
High wealth, low rates. Low wealth, high fertility rates. We used to have high fertility rates in this country 200 years ago.
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, 10 kids, farmers, they would die before they became adults of various things.
Sure.
Just like people in the poor world do today. A tooth infection, diarrhea, cancer from breathing indoor smoke, pneumonia. So there's that graph coming down. The rich world, we're below replacement rate.
Yeah.
2.1.
This is what Musk is pushing.
Well, so 2.1.
He's doing his part for sure, but
he's pushing to have more kids.
Yeah.
But what's happening is when you're why does that happen? What's the correlation? There's the correlation. What's the causative factor?
Right.
It's complicated. One of the biggest causative factors is when you're wealthy, you choose not to have kids. Okay. You don't need them for running the farm.
Right.
They're expensive.
Mm-hmm.
1, fine. Maybe 2. 2's good. Let's stop at 2. That's below replacement rate because kids die. Some die of natural causes. 2.1 is replacement rate just to keep your population stable.
Right.
India went below replacement fertility rate a year ago.
Okay.
India.
Interesting.
The 1.4 billion.
Right.
Now, their population is going to grow for a while. That's just the math, but they're below replacement rate. Plateau. Here's the mic drop.
Okay.
Our
Here's
population. If the world had U.S. fertility rates today, our population is not declining in the U.S. because people are still coming here.
Right. Because
we're not birthing them here; they're migrating here. If the world had today's U.S. fertility rates, the population would peak, and the latest data, most of what you'll read would be, say, 2085, but the latest is 2075.
Okay.
50 years.
Yeah.
In 50. Peak. What does peak mean? Does it peak and kind of plateau for 1,000 years, Scott? Because we only had 110 million people in 1000 BC.
Yeah.
We had 110 million people. It was a great census. They counted them all. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No. 110 million. It took to 1804 to get a billion.
Okay.
So 2,800 years to go from 100 million to a billion. And then from 1804 to today, we went from 1 billion to 8.3 billion in 200 years.
Right.
So what does that population do? It doesn't plateau. It plummets.
Falls off a cliff.
It drops like a rock.
Yeah.
In the same amount of time, the
Right.
Earth goes back to 2 billion people in 150 to 200 years. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
It looks like a mountain because we're choosing not to have kids. So I looked at all that and said, okay, that's got a whole scary set of implications, economic, demographic. What do we do when growth isn't the driver? Somebody will figure that out. What's good if it isn't growth? How are you going to measure your quality of your company?
Right.
Hey, we're gonna shrink again this year.
Yeah.
Awesome, because we're getting better. It's got to become a quality measure. But let's just set that aside. 2075, 50 years. We got to get there without the kind of global disruption that can happen when economic disparity continues to grow.
Right.
So 50 years. So our 50.
Yeah.
50 megawatt hours, 50 grand in 50 years. That's the global vision.
Okay.
Let's get every young person on the planet engaged because we can measure the success. We can look at every country. Where are you in the 50-50-50?
Right.
What's it going to take to get you there? And there's we could have a whole nother podcast on that. That is a complex set of things.
We're going to have to.
Let's do it. That's a whole different thing.
Get Toby in here.
Yeah, get Tobe. Let's do that together. And I'm going on Jordan Peterson's podcast tomorrow to do that topic.
Get Jordan in here. We'll have Toby and Jordan on each side, and we'll just powwow it.
Jordan hosts me. I don't think actually he went on Joe Rogan's.
Yeah, he's been on Rogan quite a bit.
Yeah, but so think about that. 50 young people listening, and I hope there are a bunch. Join us in this.
Yeah.
It's called the Energy Core, CORPS.
Okay.
If you want to get out in the world like the Peace Corps,
Yeah,
and start making a difference toward human prosperity,
mm-hmm.
bringing more modern energy, all the health and education, and cooking and shelter benefits that go along with lifting the world up, let's go. Let's see the measure of that success in your lifetime, young person. I won't be here.
Mm-hmm.
I got to set a goal beyond my lifetime just in case it doesn't happen.
You're in pretty good shape. I think you got some runway left, my friend.
I won't live to 115 unless things really change. But anyway, my kids will. Older adult kids and grandkids. It's really, it's so incredibly important that we take on energy poverty and economic poverty for real.
Yeah.
It is the most important issue of our time. The other ones are very important too, but you don't do that,
right?
The others don't.
You do that, everything else sort of falls into place.
Boom.
Yeah.
Boom. Yep.
Well, on that note, my friend, this was amazing. I want to thank you for coming in. We definitely need to do part 2. That's for sure. If people want to find your show, it's Switch PBS. They can Google it. There's a lot of on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then Energy Core can be found where? Where can people find your stuff?
The PBS show is called Energy Switch. So Google PBS Energy Switch.
Yep.
That'll come up. We're in 110 million households, over 200 PBS stations.
Yep.
And they're all independent. PBS is funny that way.
Yeah.
But they stream them now. And we're on all major podcast channels with that. They're 25 minutes long. Run them at 1.2, 20 minutes of your time. But it's fun to watch them because it's really highly produced.
They are cool. No, look, I can attest. I've been prepping for this. I've watched 2 or 3. I watched the TED Talk. They're all very well done.
Any topic you want to know in energy, we've done 70 episodes now. Hydrogen, CCS, pick your favorite thing, wind and solar, nukes, all different kinds, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Energy Core has its own website, energycore.org.
Okay.
No, .com, energycore.com.
Okay.
Switchon.org. That's my nonprofit.
Okay.
Made the Films, Energy Labs. We have free, really high-level materials for teachers, K through 12.
Okay.
We have 10,000 teachers nationwide using our stuff now in their classrooms, and that's growing. All free because we get support from companies and industries and foundations to do that kind of thing. And also we run a case competition on college campuses on energy poverty for college students competing every year to take a country and lift it out of energy poverty for real.
That's awesome.
Judging and mentors. You want to get involved, become a mentor for one of these teams. People absolutely love it. So switchon.org there. I speak all the time. You can Google me, terrifying. A lot of talks out there. So, I'm passionate about this and we do all this stuff essentially free.
Yeah. That's the most amazing part too, that you figured that.
Well, it's gifts.
Yeah.
It's aid. It's people. It's people giving to the 501c3 and saying, just keep going, man. You're helping and it matters. So
have you played dodgeball with Mike Howard?
I will never.
Like I said, he's sneaky good. He's like,
people don't know, like he's a big boy. He's a big guy. He has a lot of torque and leverage. So
I was surprised. I went at their board.
I would never do that. But I'll play tennis with him if he wants to do that.
No, I knew he looked obviously like an athlete, but when I saw him play dodgeball, I was like,
yeah, I'm not going on the other side.
No, I'm like, God, I'm on his other team. Thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure.
It's been great, Dan.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate what you're doing too to help bring this kind of messages out there. Thank you. Keep it up.
Talk soon.